Okay, so we've got Dr. Chantal Helm with us from the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland. Chantal is the BSBI training coordinator, and she's going to talk to us about a really cool, innovative training program they've got called Identiplant. I'm not going to say any more about it because I'm sure you are, Chantal. So over to you.
I am. Thanks very much, Kieran, and good morning, almost afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here to tell you about the Identiplant course. So my role as BSBI training coordinator at the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland is to look after Identiplant and FISC. So those of you who have heard of FISC, the Field Identification Skills Certificate, which was mentioned, I think there's a biodiversity short there that Dan mentioned in his slide. That's also coordinated by myself. So before I talk about the Identiplant course itself, I just wanted to mention a little bit about problem with plant ID skills and why courses like Identiplant are so valuable in improving botanical literacy amongst anybody who's actually interested in the natural world. But we have this big problem, and this is obviously across the board with all other species, but particularly for plants, I think as well, is that general knowledge about plants is really low. The ability to identify plants is pretty awful, unfortunately. Some recent surveys have given some quite scary results saying that 82% of children between the ages of 5 and 16 can't identify an oak leaf, for example. And then when you get up to A level, even biology students can't really identify any native plants, maybe not, maybe up to 3 or fewer. And then even at university level, we have got this loss of botany degrees over the years. And a recent survey looking at modules offered within biology degrees at Russell Group universities, only 1% of those modules actually had any emphasis on plant ID. So courses like Identiplant and other plant ID courses are really, really important in trying to improve the knowledge about how to identify all of our plant species in the UK and obviously in other parts of the world linked in there. So BSBI's work to develop plant ID skills is linked to our vision. We have a strategy document. I'm just going to quickly link that in nicely with where our Identiplant fits in, and also then how we work out skill levels. We have a bit of an approach to allowing people to self-assess their botanical ID skill levels. And one of our key goals is to really inspire, build, support a community of botanists that is going to be able to sustain the skill base going forward for all those big questions around conservation, impacts of climate change, food security, and so forth. So we are really working towards improving the breadth and accessibility of our training. And Identiplant is one of our training options. I will mention a few others. We have quite a lot of opportunity for training, but this particular one is really one of our online training offerings. We are moving a little bit more with, you'll see there's some new webinars that are coming out, which I'll talk about later. But Identiplant is unique in its approach. The model was developed not by us, but by a BSBI member called Brenda Harold back in 2013. And it was very innovative. And it still is very innovative in terms of its approach to an online plant ID course. Now we have this botanical skills ladder within BSBI, which has recently been updated. So hopefully there's a link going in the chat for you to go and have a look at this recent version, where, as I said earlier, individuals can self-assess their skills on a scale from 1 to 7. And we use this with our members and anybody we interact with to sort of get an understanding of this is what it means if you're level 1, this is what a 2. And if people would like to move up the botanical skills ladder to develop their skills, every time they come on training and all that sort of thing, we try and assess that in some way. And Identiplant is no different. We kind of position it at about level 2. We do get some level 1 individuals joining in Identiplant, but it's probably level 2 moving people on to level 3. So it's a beginner course, but not for total beginners. And it is aiming to get them to move on towards more serious botany, towards level 3 point of view. So this ladder also gives indications of what kind of opportunities people can have at different levels, as well as all the related botanical activities that someone may undertake if there are a particular level. So when we do a little bit of analysis of our members, we kind of have this classic bell-shaped curve, which are typical. Most of our members are sitting at about, well, they self-assess at about level 3 on that ladder. We have obviously got a large number of quite experienced, extremely exceptional botanists within our membership. And then when we look at our non-members, and these are all the people we've been engaging with, there is a different skew. But most of these members, or these non-members, I mean, that have come into our sphere of what we would call influence, I suppose, is a result of some recent engagement activities, particularly the New Year plant hunt, which you may have heard of, which runs over December into the 1st of January each year, has been running for quite a number of years now, and it's gathering data on flowering plants during that period. So it's a really interesting entry-level activity that a lot of people who are just interested at that time of year or to sort of start their journey into plants, it just involves going out and seeing what's flowering, taking a picture and submitting your record to the project. But advanced botanists also engage with it, so there is a huge amount of very interesting data, which obviously can answer questions around the impacts of climate change on phenology and all those sorts of interesting questions. We have then also got a leaflet document that has also recently been updated, and hopefully there'll be a link for you to be able to see in the chat about how you can progress your botanical ID skills, called So You Want to Know Your Plants. And this document will link with the ladder, which you've seen previously, and at each level will give you ideas and thoughts and opportunities and resources to engage with to move the journey along. So that's how we frame all of our training at BSBI, and are trying to work more towards doing that as we go forward. So Identiplant. Well, it is an online course, but as Kieran mentioned right at the beginning, it has got quite a substantial fieldwork element to it. So it was created to take the beginners, as I said, to an intermediate level. They have support of an allocated tutor. So that tutor will be someone who is a good botanist. So we expect them to be about level 4. And they have to have experience in teaching or mentoring in some form. So there is quite a rigorous application process for our tutors to undergo in order to ensure that they're able to support their students. And we try and allocate, wherever possible, the student to a tutor within their geographical region, so that there are additional opportunities. Not least of all, the tutor will know the plants in that student's local environment, but also there's potential for them to meet up in the field, join local botany groups and so forth as well, if they so wish. But in essence, it's an online course where the student is asked to go out and find a number of plant species to achieve certain levels, to be able to identify and develop certain skills that are going to allow them to identify plants independently. It's a year-long course, so it runs from February to September. So there's a lot of opportunity to build on skills, to practice different things, and to get feedback from the tutor on an ongoing basis, which then develops the botanists to the next level. So let's see the next slide. Cool. Right, so the aims of Identiplant are really to gain the ability to accurately identify plants. So it's not just about recognition. The students aren't given a set of plants which they then have to memorize some features for. They work systematically through the features. They learn botanical terminology. They learn how to use keys in order to work their way through the identification process. And it's moving away from an over-reliance on just being able to page through a book and match up pictures. It's really developing those skills necessary for plant ID. So if a student were to sort of land in an unknown location, they may very well have then the skill to actually be able to work out what a particular plant of interest is, even if they've never been there or never been able to see it. That's really the outer aim for the course. So it's about accurate observations, looking at the whole plant within their habitat. So there's quite a lot of habitat-based information, but then zooming into the tiny speeches that usually require hand lens in order to be able to make those identifications. So it does require understanding using botanical terms and learning about how plants are related to each other and they're classified. So it is a family-based approach, family-first approach, I think, as many people will call it. We're working with families and looking at the key features of those families, and then working within that to then identify the species. So the course is made up of 15 units, and in the beginning, the students are introduced to botanical classification and terminology and keys. So this is usually in February, March time, before the plant season begins, and there's not much really to look at out in the field. So it's really setting the foundational knowledge that they would need to have in order to progress. And then the different families are introduced every 2 weeks or so. And this really often coincides, well, it's aimed actually to coincide with the plants becoming or coming into flower as the season progresses. Obviously, this is dependent on the weather. It's also dependent on your geographical location. But it's all very flexible, and the students can work through the content at their own pace. There will be sort of some deadlines through the year to make sure that they catch certain species before they actually stop flowering. So it's all set up with that sort of flexibility in mind, but linking into the flower season as it progresses through the year. And then the students have a hunt list, plant hunt list, which they're given right at the beginning. And this consists of a number of common and widespread plant species, which they need to find throughout the year in their local patch. So that does mean these plants need to be common and widespread, obviously. And as you'll see in a little bit, we'll show you sort of the distribution of our students across the UK and Ireland, so that we need to be careful with which plants we work with to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to find the different species. And they need to be easy to find. We're not expecting students to go out into a nature reserve or some wilderness area. These species need to be found in their on the pavement, in a driveway, in urban areas, so they're easily accessible. And often these are the kinds of plants that most people will overlook, never really see in their environment. And then that opens up discoveries for many students who realize, oh, wow, there's actually some plants right outside my front door that I can examine. And we use a diagnostic features approach. So it's really looking at the details of the plant and trying to sort of determine what features make that specific individual plant unique, and what features, what combination of features will allow you to say that they actually belong to a particular family. So the whole approach is linked in with this sort of detailed look at the plant and trying to pull out those key features that allow you to diagnose its species. So that is what the course is about. So just a little bit of history. I mentioned that the founder, Brenda Harold, started the course in 2013. She actually started it as a result of her voluntary activities with the Herts and Middlesex Wildlife Trust in the years prior to that. And she found that when they were undertaking wildlife site surveys and botanical surveys, a number of the volunteers sort of were really wanting to improve their identification skills. So she developed this course particularly for them. And then out of that, then she built it, and it went national. And you can sort of see the history of the number of tutors that were on board, the number of students. You've got COVID, which had quite a bit of a knock on the course. But then BSBI took it over in 2023. And it is now a BSBI coordinated and owned course. Brenda is still very much involved. The course is managed by what we call the Identiplant management team, which consists of a number of experienced tutors, experienced botanists, who are all then collaborating to every year review and update the course. and ensure that it is fit for purpose as we go forward. So, and then historically, the types of students that came on the course were retired volunteers, mostly taking the course for personal interest. But in recent years, we have had a significant increase in the number of ecologists and professionals and those employed in the environmental sector taking the course for continued professional development. This is very likely due to recent changes in legislation around BNG and UK HAB as a new sort of survey methodology, which is requiring much more comprehensive plant ID skills for those individuals employed in those roles. So at the moment, I think as of this year, about 57% of the students are employed in the environmental sector. And we think about, I think 50% of those are ecologists, consultant ecologists. So we've got a sort of a bit proportion, and the rest are volunteers working within the charity sector and that sort of thing, voluntary sector, who are just actually still doing it for interest. So a good mix of different students. This map is showing the distribution of our Identiplant tutors in black dots. And then the students for 2024 are mapped in green dots. Now, I have to apologize to those in Ireland and Northern Ireland. My GIS skills, when I was making this map, I was trying to match up the mapping system for Ireland, Northern Ireland for the students, and I hadn't got it right in time. So I haven't been able to map all those students that we have in Ireland and Northern Ireland as well. But this is just instructed to show sort of the distribution of tutors and students and how broad a range of students we are attracting to the course. Last year, we had a record number of applicants, 170 students on the waiting list, which it was very sad for us to have to turn these individuals down. And capacity on the course is very much limited by the number of tutors we have. Tutors will individually probably take between 3 and 8 students each. So obviously that will have an impact on our capacity. So BSBI is currently developing an alternative model and maybe be trialing that next year, where potentially there's less reliance on a tutor for a particular sort of section of the course. But that's a sort of work in progress. But we are actively recruiting new tutors at the moment to improve our capacity so that we can deliver the course to more students. Now, running an online course like this for Plant ID for about 300 students a year across 5 countries with over 60 different tutors has its challenges. And not least of all is that developing plant ID skills does require fieldwork. So it cannot be a completely online course, we don't feel. So hence the Identiplant model makes use extensively of independent fieldwork undertaken by the student. And the student is given extensive guidance on how to work in the field, all the health and safety protocols and so forth associated with that. But because they're mostly required to find plants within their local patch, along pavements in parks and gardens and urban areas, they're unlikely to need to go very far to find most of the plants. And they have a hunt list, and many of them keep that hunt list in their back pockets. So whenever they're out and about, going to the supermarket or potentially going off anywhere, they have that list and they keep their eyes peeled looking for a plant that they may have be required to do to complete assignment associated with particular unit or family. So the students are also taught how to safely collect plants and obviously correctly collect them within the countryside code, and to press them. So the whole old-fashioned idea of pressing plants is not so old-fashioned. It's pretty important for plant ID, collecting plant specimens, knowing what to collect and how to display and press your plant in such a way that you can come back to it in the future to make detailed observations if you don't have time while you are examining the plants in the field. Another challenge is, I think I alluded to earlier, is the seasonal and geographical variation you'll have across obviously that range of areas, that whole region. So some plants which are very common in England and Scotland, for example, are not very common in Ireland. So I don't know if anybody wanted to guess in the chat what this plant is that we have shown the distribution here of from the plant atlas. A very common species here in England, but as you can see, not in Ireland. So maybe you can have a guess for that one. I can reveal it in the Q&A. And then there's obviously seasonal or phenological changes. So when the plant flowers and how that changes with latitude as you go further north, you'll have different timings for things. And that has to be taken into consideration for all the different students. And therefore, that is why the tutors are linked up with students in their local areas so that they can give guidance on saying, well, this plant is now flowering in this location. Maybe you want to go and have a look and see if you can find it. So they give them lots of guidance on where to find things and when things are coming out. So this all changes as you go north. So there's quite a lot of inbuilt flexibility within the course to allow students to find plants. They're given a full hunt list, but there are options. They don't have to find them all. They can choose maybe 2 out of 4, for example, and it will all depend on what they can find in their local area. We sometimes make use, and we are starting to make much more use of databases like iRecord and iNaturalist, which are actually interesting if you're wanting to find whether something has been recorded out of interest in your local patch. You can do a quick search of iNaturalist and say, okay, well, I'm looking for red campion. Where is it last been recorded by someone near me? And that oftentimes that can help quite well in finding a plant that's recently in an area. Students can find a species for their assignments. Now, others have mentioned obviously different learning styles, different prior knowledge. And again, we think that the tutor-led model and the fact that many of our tutors have experience in teaching will help with this. Plant ID has unique challenges. Plants are mostly green, so therefore the whole idea of plant awareness and people not spotting plants, despite them being ubiquitous around us, sort of really learning to focus in, and then also realizing that there's a whole world of variation that's within nested dimensions. So as you look at the plant leaves and then you zoom into the leaves with your hand lens, there's huge variation in the shapes of leaves, and then obviously in the sizes and the margins, and then as you zoom into the hairs, the types of hairs and the shapes and all sorts. And that sort of ability to critically distinguish between different things, sizes and shapes and colors and textures, even smells and tastes, are really quite unique challenges for plant ID, and the tutors have their ways of being able to help different students with different learning styles to be able to find a way that works best for them. And really it's about looking, how to look, where to look, and what to look for. And with a student-tutor relationship building over a year, there's lots of opportunities for the tutor to actually really get to know their students and get to understand. They ask them up in the beginning, what they sort of, their motivations for doing the course, what they want to get out of it, what their experience level is, how they like to learn, and any approaches that will help them to learn better. And the tutor can adapt their approach to that student, which really gives that unique flavor to the outcomes of the course. So allocation is done quite carefully. We are getting better and better at trying to allocate appropriate students to tutors, not just from a geographical perspective, but students now actually have to write a personal statement given the demand for the course, so that we can get a bit more insight into what they're looking for the course and what their prior knowledge is and everything is like that. So matching up students and tutors becomes an exercise in itself. The ongoing feedback that the students get throughout the year allows them to build on their knowledge, allows them to practice. So you can see quite a clear progression from the beginning. So if a student comes on the course at level 2 and they are actually engaging with the feedback that their tutor provides, the level of increase in their knowledge and their confidence is fantastic to see as they progress through the course. So by the end, they're sort of flying through and they've developed all these key skills and they realize what they can now see and do. It's very, very rewarding. So the course's value importance, we've put about 2,000 individuals through the course. So far, not all of those have completed. There are many reasons why students are doing the course. Not all of them want to get a certificate of completion. It is a lot of work to get a certificate of completion at the end. They have to submit assignments for each unit, and there are 14 units that require an assignment to be submitted. But just engaging with the course will be rewarding in itself. The students then are equipped with the skills and confidence, we think, that will benefit them in attending other courses and field meetings. And we think that with botany particularly, there are a lot of field meetings and opportunities for them to get out in the field with local groups and so forth. But many beginners potentially will be feel that they would not fit in with that sort of local group, given the fact that their knowledge may not be up to the level. Not necessarily that is the case, but it may be a perception. And they can feel very confident once they've done this course that when they engage with field meetings and go enjoying field meetings with other botanists, that they will be able to really sort of contribute as well. So the course also signposts students to courses, and signposts them further on to other things to measure their progression and to develop their botanical sort of journey. We've got quite a lot of positive student feedback. Lots of students do find the course challenging. It is a challenging course, but it is achievable with consistent work and engaging with the feedback from the tutors. Many students find the initial part a bit of a hurdle with regards the terminology and so forth. But once they start practicing the terms and making use of them and using keys, it starts to sink in, and their confidence grows. So his student who sort of felt that she was a bit out of her depth in the beginning, but really started to develop her plant ID as she went. And then this is my favorite quote, I think. Although the student was doing it on their own, she felt very supported and the pace of the course was great, forced them to focus and was continually interesting, and she wishes there was Identiplant too. So that was quite gratifying to see that from a number of students coming through the course. So where do students go to after the course? Well, we signpost them to a large number of resources. Obviously, BSBI has got a huge diversity of different resources for different levels on our website. We have handbooks and we've got various ebooks and we've got webinars and we've got field visits and conferences and so forth. So students are signposted to all of that. They potentially are signposted towards a FISC so that they can get their newly developed skill level assessed potentially. They ideally become members of the recording communities. One of our ultimate aims is to sort of encourage Identiplant students to become plant recorders, whether that is through national plant monitoring schemes or submitting records through iRecord, or through the new sort of BSBI recording app and so forth, or through their Vice County Recorder. That's really one of the key outcomes, and one thing that BSBI is very keen to actually start evaluating. It hasn't been done up until this point, but we have plans afoot to really start looking at the journey that our students are taking and how they progress after the course. And then we signpost them also to new voluntary opportunities that occur within BSBI. We currently have quite a few with regards to transcribing old record books and diaries and that sort of thing. So there's lots of that kind of desk-based voluntary opportunities that our students can also be engaging in once they've completed the course. And of course, we try and encourage as many people as possible to engage with the New Year plant hunt, which is that fun hunt in December, just recording in your local patch which plants are flowering. So what's next for Identiplant itself? Well, I mentioned that we have built our own in-house learning platform, which we called Capsella, which is the generic name for shepherd's purse, quite a common little weedy plant that you probably may or may not be aware of, but it occurs in most places, and pavements in urban areas. So Capsella is a very simple, intuitive learning platform from which we now deliver Identiplant. It came on board beginning of this year for the first year. And we think it is working very well, and we aim to really continue to develop it into sort of enhancing the content of the course. That allows us, obviously, to do so much more than ever we'd be able to do with the course material as it was in the past. We're planning on introducing some online quizzes to support learning and allow students to sort of self-gauge their skill level as they go. We're going to be creating videos to enhance the content. Surprisingly, we've done a bit of an audit of all the videos out there that we can find around basic plant ID skills, like, for example, using a hand lens, or how to tell the differences between the different types of leaves in a plant. And there's actually very little out there that is bite-sized and easy. So we need to create some bespoke videos, and that's what we hope to do as well. We're also wanting to run a number of interactive webinars through the year to cover tricky topics. So one of the constructive criticisms that we've had for the course is that there has not been much engagement with all the students across the course. And we thought, well, bringing them together within webinars will be a good idea, but also potentially trialing some peer learning opportunities. So it would be amazing if students who are within one geographical region and working with their tutor, so the tutor groups particularly, can be encouraged to get together to form their own little botany group, maybe even recording together, completing the course, and maybe some tasks that are linked to them. So that is on the horizon for the next few years. We're also working with a few universities who are interested in potentially integrating the course into their university degrees, which will be fantastic if we can get that going. We're investigating formal accreditation and CPD for the course, hours for the course. And one of our big projects for the next few months is actually evaluating the onward journeys of our Identiplant students. Now that we are gathering a huge amount of data about our students and BSBI members and anybody who interacts with BSBI, we can start really getting a big overview picture of the journeys people are taking within their plant ID endeavors. So that is the plans going forward. So BSBI is extremely grateful to the Identiplant management team who coordinate and develop the course content and so forth. So that's consisting of Brenda up to now, and a number of other experienced tutors who I've listed over here. So the course would not be possible without them. And, we are immensely grateful to them. And then finally, thanks for listening, but I just wanted to plug some new free training webinars that are going to start happening in November around plant identification on Tuesday evenings, 7 p.m. So head over to the BSBI website and book yourself a place there if you're any interested, or maybe pass on the message to anybody else who may be interested. But thank you very much for listening.